Hi, and welcome to Dark Window. I'm your host, Jim Mann. Here on this program, I will be talking with many of the leading investigators, researchers, and authors on the topics of UFOs, UAPs, alien abductions, extraterrestrials, and a host of many other fascinating and related topics. So please join me and my guest for the next hour as we reach out. This is Dark Window on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And hello, everyone. Welcome to Dark Window. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Jim Mann. And with me here in the studio is a very special person, our guest, Tracey Garbutt Dolan. Tracey is an accomplished remote viewer. She's an abduction encounter researcher, a member of the UFO research community, and Tracey has lectured internationally on her series, The Final Frontier is in Here, bringing some of her own personal experiences as a means of opening the discussion on what we as humans are able to do naturally, innately. She is the wife of UFO historian Richard Dolan and directs the Richard Dolan Members website and co-hosts the Off the Cuff podcast with Richard and Tracey. Prior to their podcast, Tracey and her husband hosted the YouTube program Intelligent Disclosure, which is still, by the way, still available on their channel. Tracey earned her interdisciplinary bachelor's degree in psychology and international studies, magna cum laude, and has been a lifelong, or has had a lifelong interest in anomalous experiences. And Tracey, how are you tonight? And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. It's a real pleasure to be here.
And, you know, we got to get the ball rolling here. And you are a fascinating person full of all kinds of information and interesting topic.
Thank you.
Let me start off with this question, okay?
Yeah.
What has your background journey been outside of the paranormal and the UFO and the metaphysical stuff? So what's been going on in the background?
Thank you for asking that. Yeah. So I think like all of us, we're all here. We're all listening to this because we have some interesting story back there. But, you know, we all have our muggle jobs, you know, our face that we have to show the world and the journey that we had getting there. And I always find it's fascinating hearing everybody's story. You know, just for me, I think I was always a curious little kid. My mom tells funny stories of that other adults used to tell her about me when I was in kindergarten, grade 1, that I was always super interested in the adults and not interested in the kids. And it's kind of true. It's just a little thing about me. Even when I was a child, I felt like I was way older than everybody. I wasn't, but I just felt that way. And I just, in a weird way, it was kind of isolating, you know. I would play with the kids, but I would always be way more interested in what the adults were doing. I wanted to explore what they were doing. I had no interest in what the kids were doing, you know, some, but not really, you know. And so I don't know what that was all about. It was just a thing about me. And growing up, I just had this really explorative spirit. And I think part of what maybe was the rudder behind that was some of the experiences that I was having, you know, starting when I was 6 years old. But, you know, I traveled, very early. By the time I was 18, I had traveled for a year for the most part on my own, backpacking around. It kind of a rite of passage in some ways to me because, you know, like a lot of people, it was filled with wonderful exploration, but also tragedy. You know, at the age of 18, I had, during that trip, I had a friend drown in front of me, and we tried to rescue him and were unsuccessful. And, we all have these things that kind of shape us. And this is certainly one of them. There's actually some very mystical things to that story. But throughout my life, I've done all sorts of crazy stuff. I was a snowboard instructor in Whistler, Canada. I was a video game artist for EA Sports. Um, you know, I kind of had this thing. I felt like in this life, I wanted to try everything, everything my heart desired. So I didn't want to ever stay in something because I felt I had to. I always wanted to sample so many different things. And I think I got a lot of criticism from my friends, but that's what I had to do. And I did. So I actually went back to post-secondary 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I have a background in new media and design, like graphic design,
Mhm.
and an AS in advertising and marketing. And then I got a BA in which was my interdisciplinary degree in psychology and international studies, which was really like a lot of it was filled with anthropology, world religions, because I didn't just want psychology. I was always fascinated in what made us who we are, but psychology wasn't enough. So I went into world religions. I went into the psychology of religion and spirituality. I went into medical anthropology, which was the place where I took a deep dive into lucid dreaming via Tibetan dream yoga. And it's where I really sort of looked at tribes around the world and how they were perceiving medical issues within their tribe, so that was really, I needed that, because psychology, I knew from my own experiences that it did not cover everything. And for the most part, a lot of psychology is not even going into the transpersonal realm. I mean, it does more now, where they're talking about all the things that are beyond the personality, including anything that happens to you, dreams, lucid dreams, abductions, whatever, like there's a whole gamut of things that happen to people, which I hope we get into, out of bodies. And I wanted the kind of psychology that I wanted to be having the discussions and exploring anything that was going to deal with and explore our minds and who we are. And because I knew from my experiences that science isn't helping me out here. So let me
Right.
explore as much as I can in academia, because I wanted to explore these things in a sort of in the deepest way that I could, that I thought. And of course, I got part of my background there and part of my background outside of academia. But that was a long answer to your question, but
Yeah.
it's all a seeker's path, that's basically
Well,
it's.
maybe, you know what, Tracy, maybe you answered my question, but I guess I want to follow through with uh, what actually got you involved in the paranormal, metaphysical UFO end? I
Yeah.
mean, you've got a lot of what we would call high strangeness.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well, go ahead.
today's paranormal UFO stuff is quite intense. Okay,
Yeah.
with given your background in that journey that you've taken as a young lady, look at you today. How did that all get started with what you're doing? You're on my show here, and
Yeah,
so
Dark Window.
here we go.
I like the name of that, by the way.
Yeah,
It's very cool. Well, probably like most people, I ended up where I am because of the things that happened to me. So things started, things that I consciously know, that I consciously remember. You have feelings about certain things, but I consciously remember an experience when I was 6 years old of these beings that I thought were in the house. And I had people's parents come over and check, and they weren't there. And, I won't go into that whole story, but I basically had a bunch of paranormally type of things happen throughout my life. But for a long time, I rejected it. Also, like I think a lot of other people too. And I think it's important to talk about, discuss these things. I rejected it and I was afraid of it. And I kept radios and TVs on to block it out. I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of the dark. I mean, really afraid of the dark. And because when I was alone, stuff would happen.
Mhm.
I still trip over trying to talk about the actual experiences, so I'll tend to generalize them a little bit more. But I had visitation type things that were verifiable in their own way. I would have beings come and tell me things to tell other people, and I would tell them, and you know what I mean? There would be some
Yeah.
weird verification in there. Mm, And it kept happening. And
Did you ever share any of this stuff with any of your friends during your young years?
never,
That you
never.
kind of kept it to yourself?
Yeah, I kept it to myself. It wasn't until I really started it. Everything came to a head because there was a point in my life where I got sick. Yeah, like a lot of people, something changes in your life and
Right.
things start to happen. I was sick, so I was I was taking some time off work. And when I was home and quiet and not keeping my brain busy and not, keeping the radio on and all that stuff, oh man, things started coming in. And I actually went and got you know how every town used to have like free magazines, free little, like they were like newspaper material
Sure.
magazines,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And yeah, and in the back it would have psychics and all this kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I actually avoided anything psychic up until this point. And then I went and got one of those magazines, and I found psychic in the back, and I called that person and I said, "Hi, I don't want a reading. I don't want you to tell me anything. I just want to tell you a story, and I want you to tell me if I'm okay, and I want you to tell me what to do." And this was a turning point for me, because I explained to her all of these crazy things that were scaring the hell out of me. And she told me, "You're okay. It's okay. You're going to be okay. There's some people in this world that for some reason, they perceive a little bit easier. And all you're going to do is you're going to build some framework, and you're going to go and you're going to see the teacher." And she asked me where I lived. And she said, "There's this wonderful teacher that lives near you, and you're going to go see her, and you're going to learn about this. You're going to learn about it, and you're going to be okay. But it's time. It's time for you to learn." And that's basically what I did. I went and talked to this woman, and I started taking classes in mediumship and dowsing and you name it, everything. And it wasn't so I could go out there and be a medium. It was just so I could manage myself,
Yeah,
and not be
right.
scared. Not be
Oh,
scared.
but Tracy, what about brothers and sisters? Did you
I
all?
have
You have.
well, that's a good question. I have a younger sister. She's
Mhm.
a couple years younger, and um, she didn't really seem to have anything like this until later. We started talking about this later. Once I started embracing it for myself and see in a class and seeing what was happening and getting some control, that's when I started mentioning it to a friend or two, and mentioned it to my sister eventually. And it turned out that I would have I often don't like using these old words like visions, but I
Mhm.
would have what I call overlays where, there's solid reality, And then you will have an overlaid reality where you can still tell the difference completely, but you'll get a scene playing out and you'll get information on top. And it turned out that my sister had virtually the same thing, but it came in the form of dreams. So,
Interesting. Yes.
yeah. So it just comes differently for her, and it doesn't come as often. But it definitely comes around death for both of us.
Oh, no kidding. Really?
Yeah, it definitely comes around death. And sometimes it comes for other people, but I can't control it. It just, sometimes I get, sometimes this happens and sometimes it doesn't. And I never know when, but one story I talk about, which I can tell now or I can tell later, is the story of my father, which really kind of solidified for me, okay, this is my life. And it solidified it for my sister, what was happening with her as well. It told us many things. Reality is not what we think it is. We're so much more than what we think we are. And yeah, lots of people can perceive this. We're not weird. This is normal. So I don't know if you want me to tell the story or you want me to hang off on that.
I mean, if you've got something to say, let's hear your story. I think I've heard about the story about your father before, but I thought that was a very interesting story. So yeah, go ahead. Feel free.
Okay, sure. I tell it because I think a lot of people probably have stories like this, to be honest.
I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah. And one of my main things is I feel like we should be having these discussions more. A lot of people are keeping these secrets and they keep them till the day they die. And I think it's kind of sad when we have this magical, mystical sort of side of all of us that we don't talk about. So, yeah. So the story of my father, my dad was this larger than life. He was at the time I'm talking about. This is around 2009, and he was about 67. My dad was in perfect health. My dad could never retire. He's doing a million things. He was all, like he's moving so fast all the time. You can hardly see him. He has to stay busy. So even though he retired, he got busier than he'd ever been. He was helping people with Habitat for Humanity. He was mentoring people. He was, my dad, I don't even really use Facebook. My dad had like 1,000 friends on Facebook, like way back in the day. And he would go and travel and meet them all from his high school. And I mean, the man was full of vigor. He was skidooing across Canada because it's just something he wanted to do. He's very, very healthy, robust man is my point. There was no slowing down. And so there was no reason to suspect he was not well in any way. And I had been lying in bed in the daytime, just, and I wasn't asleep. And I looked to one side. I remember looking at a blank wall to my left. And I had one of these overlays. And my father was sitting in the back of my car, smiling at me. So it was an experience. It wasn't like a picture. It was like an experience. And it was almost like I smiled back, It was very real. Yeah. But not much else happened. But when it was over, I knew what it meant. I don't even know how I knew. And this speaks to something we have in us as well. But I knew he was going to die at that moment, that he was saying goodbye. It was a very special way of letting me know, because we had a little joke about my car. he
Really?
just thought I
Yeah.
had this really cheap car and I loved it. And he just thought it was so funny that I wanted to keep this cheap car, but it was perfect for me because I was snowboarding and mountain biking and I didn't want a good car. I wanted to, kind of a
Yeah.
beater car at the time. And so it was always this little joke with us. And so it was just perfect. And he didn't tell me he was going to die. I knew
You
he
knew
was
it.
going to die. And he it wasn't, I actually phoned my sister the next day and I said, hey, have you had any dreams about Dad? And she said, yes, she had had 2 dreams that he was going to die. And, we thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I thought, well, I'll just call my mom. And I'll pretend that it was just a dream and just see. So I phone. And I would never be so arrogant though to say, hey mom, oh my God, I had this, dream that Dad's going to die. I would never say that. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
sometimes these things are right and sometimes they're not. That's just the reality, right? So I phone her up in the morning and I say, how's Dad's health? I had a little dream, I was just wondering how his health was. And she said, oh, he just had a full bill of health. And he just had a physical. He's doing great. He's outside right now. He's doing this, he's doing that. And so what do you do with that? So my sister and I just decided to do nothing. We just have to bury it because it must have just been a false
Right.
go
Yeah.
here. So we just buried it. And then it was, I don't know, a couple months later that I was talking to my dad on the phone or emailing or something. And he just mentioned some little thing in passing, like he had skipped a meal or something. And I just had this feeling, oh my God, I wonder, and so I did this meditation. I went deep into the space that I have now cultivated very deeply for myself. I use it for remote viewing and everything. I go there looking for the answer. And the whole thing came up like a tidal wave. And I phoned my sister and said, we're getting on a plane. She lived nowhere near me. I lived nowhere near my parents. Like we were all very far apart, across Canada. We were in British Columbia, Canada on the far west coast, and our parents were in Ontario, a few provinces over.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. We were nowhere near them. So we're like, let's get on the plane and get there right now. And we both did. And within a couple of days. And when we got there, my dad was unable to speak. And it turned out he got pancreatic cancer and he just went 100 to 0 really, really, really quickly. And passed. And I tell the story because for so many reasons that touch so many people. But one of the things is, okay, just to pull this apart a little bit, my dad was alive when this visitation occurred. We often hear about these from people who've passed. My father was alive.
You're talking about when he was in the back seat of your car.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's the middle of the day in a real day. And somehow some part of my father, who's already seemingly in the future, because he was saying goodbye, visits me across Canada, let's just say.
Right. Yeah.
And in the middle of the day, and is letting me know that my life is about to be turned upside down. And he wants me to know, I mean, I could just feel all this. He wanted me to know it's going to be okay. That I felt all this within it, that it was like, dear, it's my time and I'm fine with it. That's what it felt like.
Right. Yeah. I would. That's a
Right?
lot to process, Tate. I can understand. That's a lot to process. What do you do with that?
Right. What do you do with that? But I will tell you that, for sure that there is some other part of us functioning. It would seem. I shouldn't say for sure.
That's the only thing you could come away with.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a second part of us functioning independently, intelligently, that is warning us. So you and I were having this, talking about this a little bit in a separate discussion where we were talking about out-of-body experiences, because really we're talking about two parts of us. So there's this other part of us that is intelligent and interacting, and in this case was warning me. And not only that, but through my father's like rapid passing, I felt such incredible closure on this because of what had happened. It was almost like I had this little tiny vision, but all of this information and all of this emotion and all of this additional, there's a name the Monroe Institute uses called getting a rote. A rote is like an information ball that's filled, like you might just see a picture of something, but it's filled with all this extra information. And it was kind of like that. But it tells us that we are not just these bodies. We're more than our physical bodies, as the Monroe Institute always says. I mean, it's true. We are more. We are so much more. And
well, I like the final frontier is in here.
Yes.
You know, we always hear space, the final frontier.
Yeah.
But I think the human consciousness, human awareness, our mind, the final frontier is in here. And you mentioned Monroe Institute. And I want to move into something here real quick.
Sure.
What about remote viewing? Tell me about, how did you get involved in that?
Well, first of all, yeah, the when I came up with that lecture title, The Final Frontier is in here, it was after remote viewing, after everything else. And, you know, Richard and I were walking and he said, what is it that you want people to know? What is the thing you most want people to know? And I said, I want them to know that the final frontier isn't out there. It's in here. The final frontier is in here.
I think that's perfect.
Yes, it's like the greatest mystery inside our mind. I mean, yes, we can go and explore space, but how much of that are we going to get to actually explore ourselves before we die, or even get to know? And then it might even be filtered, you know, I don't know. But once you start digging into all these modalities and you have these experiences for yourself, you see that the key to all of these things is going inside us. And then you look back at what all the higher aspects of religions and different philosophies, they're all saying the same thing. They're all pointing an arrow in the same way, saying, know thyself.
That's perfect.
Know thyself.
Yes.
And so I think the reason why I got into remote viewing, I kind of bumped into it, honestly, because I was exploring other things.
It's a good way to
put it. Yeah, like I was already looking into mediumship, this, that, whatever, you know, I had done lots and lots of stuff, but I went to the Ramtha school, and I didn't know that they did remote viewing there. And, you know, I know some people don't like that school, whatever, but I'm going to say it doesn't matter what school you go to. It's what you put into it and what you get out of it, and what it does to you to help you know yourself. And that school did some amazing things to help me know myself. And one of the things was we would do some basic sending and receiving exercises, and they wanted to prove to you, well, first of all, they educate you on quantum physics. So you understand the science of how these things can happen, like quantum entanglement. And then you try all these experiments. And one of those is sending and receiving, like what you would one person would be looking at an image. And once you entangled, either by getting to know someone and talking to them, you entangle your energy, and then you project and you send to them, and they try to receive it. And then we did more complicated things. You know, we work our way up the scale, and we would do different remote views, future remote views, all sorts of different things. We did blindfolded work there. We did like amazing disciplines. It taught me so much about myself. I'm very grateful for the lessons that I learned there.
Well, with all of that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's how I
No.
got into remote viewing. That I bumped into it there, and I had to pursue it because it was my fascination with the mind and my pursuit for myself of needing to know where these minds of ours can go. If you've had a lifetime, and I know some of your background, and where reality is more than it seems.
Absolutely.
Well, the breadcrumb is there, and I guess it's just whether we take it or not. And so I kind of felt like I had to explore remote viewing in the fullest capacity possible to know what my mind was capable of doing. So it's always been very personal for me. It's never been about, I need to remote view the moon, I need to remote view this.
Mm.
I needed to know, who are we? Who am I?
That's perfect. And, I think that the evidence is there. It's just that we have to train ourselves to be aware of
Yeah.
what evidence is laid out before us, which leads me to another question here as we move on. Okay, since we're on the topic of remote viewing,
Yeah.
what has been some of the most kind of like interesting remote viewings that you've done? I mean, and let me ask you this: that's an interesting question in itself. What's been your most interesting remote view? And what is your approach any different than anybody else's? And when it comes to remote viewing, something I'm not real informed of, but I'm very interested in it.
Yeah.
So what has been one of your most interesting remote views?
Well, I often tell what we call the Orlando story. And I tell it primarily because it's again showing so many things about us, and I feel almost a duty for people to know that this is possible. And I always say this, but I mean it. I never tell this story to brag. I always tell this story so people listening know that it is something that you can do, like that we all as humans can do. I feel like I need to tell people we can do this. And that the remote viewing programs have been doing this for a long time. So this is why I tell the Orlando story, and Richard always encourages that.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, remote viewing is really about your intuition, but it's a set of instructions on top of it. I heard someone else call it that in a very simplistic way, and I love that description. It's really true. It's kind of this intersect in a way of science and psychic. So they were just trying to create protocols to help pull out the psychic in people, right?
Right. Yes.
And yeah, it's really what it is. And I mean, it's a system of asking yourself questions. So they're
Oh,
preset
really? Okay.
questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really all it is. So a target is hidden from you, and you learn the questions and how to write it out on the paper. And just this really good method that served them well, at SRI and in the military. And so you just follow this, right? And it works for a lot of people.
So wait,
And
let me ask you:
mhm,
when you
yeah,
remote view, is
yeah,
it kind of like going into a meditation?
yes,
Is it,
yes,
and you have a piece
yeah,
of paper that you draw
yes.
things on, or
Mhm.
how does
Yeah, so
that work?
you're typically alone at your desk, and you just have a piece of paper, and you have a pen or a pencil, and that's it. You could have someone else there. There's different ways you can do it, but all you need is a piece of paper and a desk, to write, and your mind. And so really, it's once you learn and you go through all the levels of it, you just have to find your own way of quieting and calming your mind to the best of your ability. So yeah, people will meditate. People will do what they call a cool down, but it's basically, it could be, you're just clearing off your mind. You're really probably dropping into an alpha brainwave slower state. When we're in beta and we're really, active and alert, that's not where you want to be. You want to be just relaxing and breathing. It's meditative and you're just dropping down.
So
And
that alpha state is kind of what happens to you before you fall asleep?
Yes. So we're awake and aware in beta state. When
Right.
we start to drive or relax, we go into alpha. And then we have some other stages, brain states below that. As we go into sleep, we go from alpha down to theta, and then to delta is where we're sleeping.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I'm just, a lot of, when people are meditating and relaxing, if you had them hooked up and you were watching their brain waves, they would be slowing down and you would be going from beta into alpha. That's just where it's starting to slow down.
Is that the same state that you're in when people are working in the field of hypnosis, because I've gone through a few of those sessions.
Yeah,
you're
right.
in this relaxed state. You're fully aware, but you're like really in this almost a daydream kind of.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, you're like absolutely right. Oh, however, with an induction, a hypnotic induction, most likely they're going to take you deeper into slower cycles. So they're probably going to take you into a theta. And I don't know if it was the same for you, Jim, but for me with my hypnosis sessions, they're almost taking you to, a mind awake, body asleep state. Like you're so tired that you I at least found for myself, like when they would ask me a question, my ego was so sleepy that it didn't want to fight me like it usually would, going, oh no, don't say that. Don't reveal that, like don't, the ego gets really sleepy and it doesn't fight you and you're able to get more truthful information. The critic in us has shut down a little bit. So it's similar.
That's that ego, that problem. It's like, this can't really be happening. This is nonsense.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So with remote viewing, for me, I had, before the remote viewing, I had become a pretty big meditator and it deepened and deepened over time. And so I don't know if that's why part of it was easy for me, because I was already doing that. I loved meditation and I could easily do an hour in the beginning. And I did, after my training, I would do a full hour before I did my targets. But you don't need to do that. And you can work up to a totally different way of dealing with it. But you're completely right with what you're saying, bringing that into, comparing that to hypnosis. Yeah. It's like meditation.
Okay,
now, and from that, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thoughts, please.
I was just going to say, from that state, that more relaxed state, you are then asking your questions. You're probing your mind. It's like your left brain that's analytical. The interviewer is interviewing the right brain. I love that. It's yes.
That sounds very interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It is interesting. And where else can you go where you're pushing your mind like this to see what it can do? You know
what, Tracey? I'm going to get you back on our program again, and we're going to talk strictly about remote viewing. I do want to move on a little bit because there's some other things I think we need to talk about here.
Sure.
Now, you have mentioned to me in the past about hooded beings and shadow beings and things, and I'm very interested in that because I have a little bit of experience in that. So I've heard that you had encounters with these hooded beings. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yeah, sure. So I was with a friend and we were at her house. It was not dark. We were not drinking or anything. We were actually watching a documentary. and both of us staring ahead at the documentary, and this flash happened, and this part is always hard to describe, but I feel like I was coming to, but I felt frozen, and I had this saying in my head, like that was a projection of the TV, almost like it was fighting me. And I was like, no, that wasn't. And I had seen this flash of a being, but it was, I always describe it this way, but this is how it was. It was like a slow flash. So my mind registered this whole being, and my friend was sitting beside me, and I looked over at her and said her name, and she was just staring ahead. And, she sort of had the same experience as me. We jumped up and we were saying where it was standing. It was directly between us and the TV. It was just a little bit in front of the TV. It was super tall. It was dark. And, it was this hooded being. And what do you do with that? What do you do with that? So we did not talk about it for years. And it wasn't until I started going to UFO conferences and talking to people. And it's funny because they were like, did anything happen? I'm like, no. And then boom, I had this memory come back of the hooded being. I phoned her up and said, did this really happen? She said, yes, this really happened. And so it wasn't until not that long ago, talking to Yvonne Smith, she's like, you should draw that out. And so I did. And I'm glad I did. That's my drawing. Yeah, that's my drawing. And
so that's not your typical person with a hoodie sweatshirt on. That's some other sort of a...
Right. And so I have been not obsessed, but it's something I do on the side. I do all the stuff Richard and I do, our podcast and different things, but this is, I actively seek people who have had hooded being encounters, because when you've had something yourself, you want to find other people who've had these things as well. So you can start to look for patterns and why it happened. And so, can I say that I ask everybody I know, basically, that right. Especially in the field, because it's not like I just say to random people, have you ever had a hooded being experience? Because let's be real, we hide these things from the most of the world. But you were one of the people that I asked, because you had other things happened in the past.
So that's very interesting in itself. I mean, the whole hooded being thing, of course, this isn't the first time I've ever heard people mention the whole hooded being.
Right.
But that's a paranormal experience. Correct?
Jim, I wonder, we always try to categorize and classify these things. And sometimes they just, for me, I guess we could say that. I just know for myself and the research I've been doing and the people I've been talking to, that I'm dividing my research into two areas. One is shadow beings, and one which I consider more paranormal, but again, they're kind of arbitrary categories in a way.
Right, yeah.
Because we don't know, but this hooded being was very physical to me, and the robe was very physical to me. And so, and the feel of this didn't feel like any other paranormal things that I've had happen. It felt more real. So I don't know where to put it, but this thing had a very businessy feel, and it didn't scare me either, by the way. So I felt there was definitely some cognitive manipulation going on. There's a lot of tales of that in our field, that's for sure.
Okay, so I have a series of questions I wish I had time to ask you, but we're running down on the time here. We hear that you've been studying abductions these days. In fact, you went to an archive facility and saw some of the letters firsthand.
The communion letters. Right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Whitley Strieber and Anne
Right.
Strieber. Whitley wrote the book Communion, and they after he wrote the book, him and Anne received tons and tons and tons of handwritten letters from people. Well, a lot of those letters now have gone to Rice University in Houston, and I was just there with some of my colleagues, Jordan Pease and Lori Wagner and Danny Sheehan. And we were looking at these archives and going through them. And I will just tell you, it was quite an incredible experience reading these letters firsthand. It just really affected me. It's different these days when we have emails, but reading these handwritten letters, pages and pages of people, and of people who, again, this brings me back to what I was saying before, hiding these gigantic secrets in their life about these things that happen, that are not explained by science. They're talking, and they're talking about, this happened to me, this happened to my daughter, this happened to my grandfather, and it made them go to religion. It made them go away from religion, because nothing in the world is helping them sort this out. And Whitley, oftentimes they would say, this is the first time I've ever told anybody. So here you have this isolating thing happening to all these people in the world. And this is the whole reason why I talk about these things. I still get nervous doing these things, but I feel like we need to be talking about this. And so those letters, I was going through multiple pages, and then there's a whole box in front of me. And then just when you get through that, there's another box and another box and another box. There are hundreds of thousands of letters. And I am now doing first-person abduction research, and I am absolutely loving it. And I love it, but it's sad. Some of it is sad, especially when people are so isolated and not talking to each other about it. So, so much is happening to us that science does not explain. And this is how I always come back to what my lecture is about. Like, the final frontier is in here. And so let's explore what's going on inside our minds, and let's explore this phenomenon, and let's not be afraid to do that. So
that's perfect. We've only got a few minutes left, so
it goes so fast.
Here's a question for you. What are you and Richard working on these days?
Okay. So pretty much everything we do is either going on the YouTube channel, Intelligent Disclosure, or it's going on our website, which is called richarddolanmembers.com. And we've got free stuff there and member stuff. But we have a new podcast that the two of us are doing together. It's audio only, which I love. And Richard and I just talk about whatever we feel like. And people will probably be surprised if they hear it, that I pull him a little more into the woo than you would expect. So I had him talking about tarot one time. So it's kind of a new passion project for both of us. He still does all his same shows, but this is something that we do together, where we bring Richard's world and Tracey's world together, and it's kind of fun. We are really enjoying doing it. And so we have our Off the Cuff. It's a full length podcast that is available to members. It can be anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, which is this is the members version. And then we have clips. We take out short clips, from 10 minutes to a half an hour, and we put those up on YouTube. And that's it right there. So those are our clips, and this is kind of one of our many projects, but this is just a new fun thing that we're doing right now. So,
but a lot of your old stuff is still out there, so people can still like your YouTube stuff that you had. That's still very pertinent and very interesting.
Yeah, are you talking about our Richard stuff, or are you talking about?
Well, anything the Dolans do is interesting in my mind.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's we still have our show that we did together archived. It's still there, Intelligent Disclosure. There's a playlist, and if people are interested and they want to see my lecture, because maybe you feel alone and you just want to hear someone else talk about their stories, or you want to know a little bit more about remote viewing because we couldn't get into it and I didn't tell my story. I tell it in my lectures, and you can go to the Tracey playlist there and you'll be able to get one of the lectures in there. But
Well,
yeah, so
that's
that's what
perfect.
we're doing.
And Tracey, can I have you back on?
Yes, you can. I would love to
And
come back, Jim, because I kept it kind of serious and
yeah,
really I'm not that serious of a person, to be honest.
but I'm
So we
fascinated with the whole remote viewing thing, which I know that you are very
yeah.
involved with. And I would
Yeah,
like to expand on that somewhat.
it kind of
But
needs its own show, doesn't it? It's hard to mix
it
it in
does.
with
Yes,
everything
we could
else.
talk. We could talk
Yeah,
an
oh
entire
yeah.
hour just on remote viewing and how popular remote viewing really is, and how the government at one time, and maybe
Yeah.
still are, involved with
Ye
remote viewing and the success that they had, that
right.
they have had. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Yes.
you are right. You
Yeah.
are right. We all funded the remote
Yeah.
viewing
So
program for a long time, so
Tracey, is great. It's been great having you. We're running up on the end of the program. Man, that's a quick hour, isn't
I
it?
know, that was the blink, we're done.
Yeah, we're done. So all I want to say is thank you, Tracey, for joining us here on Dark Window. It's been a
Thank
fascinating
you.
conversation, and we're going to pick up again later. But
Sounds
to
good. I
all of
loved
our
being here. Thank you.
yes, but to all of our listeners, please join us. Okay, next week when we have another special guest, we will host another special guest. Right now, I can't say as who, but you can bet that it will be as captivating a topic as anything in the world of high strangeness. So thank you, Tracey. So on behalf of my
Thank you,
guest,
Jim.
Tracey Dolan, our program manager, working behind the scenes, Patricia Wilkinson, and the team at KGRA Digital Broadcasting, I am your host, Jim Mann, and this is Dark Window, and good night.
Good night, everyone.